teams, and I have pulled some of those teams together to help bring to conclusions and solutioning. It can be really difficult to work across so many that have differing opinions or very strong opinions, but coming to a consensus is very important so that the team has a good way to a path forward, and they both sit on both sides of the.
You can always finish the sentence.
Yes,
I won't make you
please.
cut off in the middle.
That the team comes to a good consensus. I'll leave
Thank
it
you,
there.
Rebecca.
Thank you. My name is Mike Britton, and we've lived here almost 4 years. My wife Rachel, who's out there, we both grew up in a small towns in West Texas. When I graduated from high school, I fulfilled my long dream of wanting to be a United States Marine. So I enlisted, ended up serving for 20 years in the Marine Corps, had a lot of opportunities to go around the world. From there, I worked in the telecom business for about 16, 17 years. Probably most people can't remember what MCI was, but that's who I worked for. I had a good career there. I managed a group of about 150 people. I had about a $65 million capital budget that I had to maintain. So what equips me for city council? When you go back to the Marine Corps, one of the big things I came out of that with is a very thick skin. So I'm hoping that will help. But more importantly is one of the things that the Marine Corps teaches you is how to make decisions and make decisions courageously. And I think that's important because there are going to be decisions that a council member has to make that is the right thing, but it's not going to be popular. So you have to have the moral courage to do so.
Great, and Rebecca's going to be next first. Okay, so what do you think the current and past Rowlett councils have handled well, and what is a mistake you believe that they have made?
So I think that the current council has done a good job at keeping the city running, and so that we can move forward in progress with the city, keeping the vision, setting forward. I also think that setting the bond for our 2021 and putting those things together could have been done a little differently, and that we could improve upon, maybe breaking up those bond pieces into smaller packages so that the voters can have more distinct differences between the things that they're voting on rather than getting them into a lump sum.
Okay, great. You're next, yes.
Well, I would also have to agree with Rebecca on that. I am never a fan of taking a municipal bond and making it multifaceted, if you will. I think they need to stand on their own because, you may have a number of bonds on a particular issue. A couple of them may be very popular amongst folks, and some of them are not. So you're kind of forced to vote up or down on one that has a plethora of different issues. I'm more in favor of that. But I'll also say that I really believe that the council could have done a better job in terms of our issue with our police department. For those who aren't aware, we have an issue that had an ongoing issue between the police department and municipal court. And I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong, but I will say that the council should have taken an opportunity to at least listen to the allegations that were being made, or at least champion maybe an independent investigation of those, and then had the information that they needed to make the right decision.
A couple things I think that City Council did really well over the past several years, honestly, is with the Bayside deal, particularly the southern portion of Bayside. And for those of you who may not be in the know, the plan was to alter the original vision, downsize the fountain and everything that was surrounding the water element of it, and completely change the vision of what Bayside was going to be. And City Council stood their ground. Ended up in court with, or would have eventually ended up in court with Bayside Land Partners, and eventually they backed down. So I applaud council for having the fortitude to stand their ground on that. And the second is just the whole water issue and the fact that we pursued that as far as we did, fighting that battle. In regards to something in particular that hasn't already been said here that I think council could have improved on would be just an overall vision for what the city is to be. I think we've lacked that for some time. We do have a comprehensive plan, we do have a strategic plan, and those have not always been consistently followed. And so what you kind of end up with is perhaps zoning requests that we might approve a rezoning in one particular area and think, that's no big deal, it's just one little spot. And then we do it again over here, and we do it again over here, and we do it again over here. And then you end up with kind of this hodgepodge within our city as opposed to a more coherent vision overall.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, Mike, you're going to do this one first, and I'm actually going to kind of expand on what you just mentioned. In the last few years, Rowlett has lost 2 police chiefs, wherein the main issue has been stated to be an internal conflict between the presiding municipal court judge and the police departments and/or chiefs. Constituents have raised concern about a lack of council involvement in the conflict resolution of this issue. So how does your experience contribute to resolving conflict of this magnitude?
Well, one of the first things that my experience would bring to bear is that you've got to look at all the facts. You can't be shy about willing to peel that onion back, if you will, and whether it reflects bad on the council or not, you need to get the facts out. And that's why I believe that the council had a great opportunity, regardless if they may be tied close to the municipal judge or to the chief or whatever, and it doesn't matter. There were allegations that were made, at least a half a dozen or more allegations, and the proper thing to do would have been to commission a third-party investigation of that, let them do the investigation, talk to the people who've made allegations, and then present back to the council their recommendations. And I believe that would have given the council a great opportunity, or at least given them what they needed to make the decisions that they probably should have made. So.
Jeff? Sorry about the passing back.
That's all right. Do you mind reading the question one more time,
Sure,
Cindy?
I will. Okay, in the last few years, Rowlett has lost 2 police chiefs, wherein the main issue has been stated to be an internal conflict between the presiding municipal court judge and the police departments and/or chiefs. Constituents have thus voiced concern about a lack of council involvement in conflict resolution on this particular issue. How does your experience contribute to resolving conflicts of this magnitude?
That's a really good question. The tendency, I think, here is to talk a lot about the department and about the judge, but the question really is, what's our experience in conflict resolution? And I am a huge advocate of communication, and then learning from that communication and then taking action. Simply allowing things to happen without taking action is unacceptable. So what was missing from this situation was action. And I think the only thing worse than doing something is not doing anything. And inaction in of itself is an action. And what we were left with is just a really toxic and bad situation. Personally, my experience, again, is just communication. We have to talk about these things. We have to be willing to listen carefully to what's said, to hear if there are complaints, and then to address those.
Thank you. Rebecca?
In my experience of conflict resolution, I found that the first thing you have to do is listen to both sides of the party. The second thing you need to do is make sure that you have all of the facts and everything gathered. But the third thing is you have to take action, and it has to be quickly. If you don't take action quickly, then the conflict continues to simmer and get worse and worse. But the fast resolution of an action, anything that's in conflict, will help the situation get better. Any action is better than no action.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and next first is going to be Jeff. Am I right on that?
I think so.
Try to keep track over here, y'all, but I'm so involved in listening to what you're saying. Let's take a quick turn to taxes. Let's look at that. Residents are concerned about rising home values as it relates to taxes. Everybody always likes to think their value of their house is higher until they get that tax bill, right? So what will you do as a city council member to help address this issue?
So there's a couple of approaches. There's obviously everyone probably has gotten your tax bill by now, or at least your assessed value, and you know what it looks like, and it's not good. There's a couple of approaches you could take. There's been some talk of changing the homestead exemption, either across the board or particularly for seniors. There's a couple of tactics you can take there. What's important to realize from a city perspective is that the taxes that you pay to the city of Rowlett is only about 30% of your tax bill. Garland ISD or Rockwell ISD eat up a big chunk. And then you also pay taxes to Dallas County, Parkland Hospital, as well as Dallas College. And so really, anything that we do here in the city to move the needle is only going to move it a small amount because it's really only 30% of your overall tax bill. SB 2 that Texas passed, that the state passed, I believe 2 years ago or last year, definitely changes what municipalities are allowed to do in terms of how we adjust taxes. And what we're going to find this year is that we are really hamstrung on what we can do, and the rate is going to end up going down. I mean, there's going to be no doubt about that. By the time we look at protested values and all those things, it's not going to matter because the rate's going to end up going down anyway. But I will definitely advocate to keep the people that live here here. We don't need to be pricing people out of our homes with taxes.
I would advocate for everyone to do an appeal for their taxes on their properties. As I received mine, it's hard for me to believe that my property went up 50% in value. The reality of getting that would be slim if there was a turnaround sale. So make sure that you, as a citizen, really do the due justice to yourself. Don't just ignore the tax rates that came in and appeal them if you don't feel that your value is truly assessed. As a council member, I would support anything that would help our citizens in their tax rates. We currently have some things in place for our senior citizens, and I would continue to support that going forward.
And I'm sure everybody's going to agree with me when I say that my default setting is that I don't want to pay more taxes, you know. And when we had the same reaction when we opened up our appraisal. It was just like, really, are you serious? It's gone up that much money. But we all don't want to pay any more taxes. And as a council member, that would be my commitment, to keep taxes at what we control within this city as low as possible. But you also have to realize that we also expect our water to turn on and all the other essential things that we count on as a city to operate functionally. So it's a tightrope operation, if you will, and keeping the taxes low, but making sure that we have sufficient funds to not just keep the essential services going, but all the other things that a city has to spend in operating a city of this size. And it's even more difficult now because we know we're seeing inflation rates. Everything is going up that we can imagine. And so it's always going to be a challenge when you try to keep taxes low but maintain the resources that you need for the city.
Rebecca's next. Okay, I'm gonna kind of extrapolate on what all three of y'all were talking about. We talked about the tax rates. Do you think that the city taxes are high, too low, just about right? And further, and if we have to go a little bit over our time, we'll do this. But further, and having been in the state, this has been discussed. But if the state talks about getting rid of property tax, then how would you, as a city council person, suggest that you pay for those services that Mike was just talking about?
So our city tax rate currently now, I have to say that the previous council has done a great job with the tax rate as we've come down 4 cents over the last 5 years. And going forward, I would be opposed to raising the tax rate if it were to impact our revenue returns for our citizens. As far as the, can you repeat the last part of the question?
Yeah, there's been talk in Austin about, and I understand the things that are decided in Austin always affect you guys on a municipal level, and I don't think that's discussed enough, by the way. But if the Austin next legislature, they said we're getting rid of property taxes, heard that all the time. Just get rid of them. I've heard people, and I'm almost a senior, so I get where people say, let's get rid of it for the senior citizens. Okay, then what Mike was mentioning was, okay, how do you pay for your police, your fire, your hospital, your whatever? So, and you may not have thought about this, so I'm rambling on, giving you a minute to think to think this through. But if that were to come down from the state legislature, what do you think would be a way to look at paying for those services that people receive? They have to be paid for. Nothing's free.
I think that they would come from other forms of taxes, unfortunately, in the city. I don't know how else we would pay for those if we don't get the revenue from our property taxes. The city is receiving a lot of the revenue that it gets from our property taxes. In our candidate forum, we learned that 90% of the revenue from the city comes from our property taxes. So we would have to find another way in another form of a tax in order to do that. I'd hate for that to happen. I lived in the state of Missouri where we paid a different kind of tax. We didn't pay, it may come in the form of a state tax if we do not have those property taxes.
Yeah, it's your turn. We're always going this way. It's just where we start.
Well, when I hear Austin talking about getting rid of property taxes, you know, the personal side of me says yay, but the realist inside of me says, well, you're going to have to make up that difference somewhere. And so I don't want to see a state tax. I mean, we attract a lot of business into the state of Texas because we don't have a state income tax. So you're going to have to come up with some kind of form to pay for the services that we all depend on. And that's either, like Rebecca said, there's going to be some kind of tax that has to be implemented. If there's not a property tax that cities like Rowlett and others are depending on to help fund and their operating expenses and other things. So I've heard that talk before, but if you take it away, there's going to have to be filled with something else, and we probably won't enjoy that either. So.
Can you restate the first part of your question? Sorry.
Wait, I lost my paper. Well, my first part was, do you think that the city taxes we currently have are about right, too high or too low? And then just the follow-up question was one I just kind of threw in as
Yeah.
a former state legislator. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right. So, that really is a tough question. To me personally, I think that's a question you answer personally almost. And I feel that they're about right. I feel like we get a good return on the taxes that we pay. We get good services throughout our city. I feel like, generally speaking, we're a safe city. I know our fire chief. I feel like we have a really strong fire department. The parks that we visit are nice, and they have a lot of amenities. We have a great library program. We invest in other ways throughout the city. So I feel like we do have a number of good amenities, and that we really get good value for what we pay. Second to that, the state tax is an interesting conversation. As far as eliminating property taxes go, there's really only two other ways you can make it up, and one is through sales tax, and one is through a state income tax that's withheld from your paycheck every time, like many other states do. And I don't know that you can fully make that up on sales tax because there is such a disparity in the commercial makeup of our city versus other cities, and so you would likely not end up with a very consistent sales tax city to city. You would probably have Rowlett have a much higher sales tax to be able to accrue enough funding to be able to pay for the services that we have, whereas a city that's more so based in commerce would have an easier time getting to that level. So I am not a proponent of eliminating property tax without a really, really good plan in place behind it. And I think a lot of what draws people from outside our state into Texas is, again, the fact that we don't have an income tax on our paycheck, and that makes a huge difference.
I agree. Okay, Mike, you're going to be first. Okay, as long as we're talking about budgets and what the tax money that comes in, if the city were to receive a $10 million grant, and you could spend it any way you wanted for the city of Raleigh, how would you spend it? How would you invest that $10 million?
Well, what street do we start on? I mean, and how much will $10 million get you? I mean, we're talking a lot of multi-million dollars just to keep our cities our city streets maintained. But I probably would focus it on infrastructure. I would look at the system that the city's using now and how they're indexing all the streets, and they're giving a particular score on how bad that street is, how much of that's deteriorated. I would use that as a priority, but I would spend that money on infrastructure as much as I could.
Okay, Jeff? Sorry, Rebecca, you're in the middle of it. Pass it back and forth.
So I love what Mike said, but I'm going to depart from that, and I'm going to say that I would love to see us go with an animal shelter with that $10 million. I think that is a huge need that has been unrecognized in our city for a long time. I don't know how far $10 million would go toward a new animal shelter. I know that ours has many issues. It's very old, has a lot of problems, smells bad. The list goes on. But I think that is one of the critical needs within our city. If you start ranking infrastructure, public safety, you hit animal shelter at number 3 or number 4, somewhere in that list. And it is one piece of our aging infrastructure of the city that we desperately need to address.
If I were to get $10 million on my city wish list, there are so many things. I would want to use the money to put diverse things across the city, because that's not enough money really to hit any one thing good, except for the animal shelter, which I think was 5.5 value for a brand new one. You could put that in. But infrastructure, public safety, the animal services, and parks are my top 4. Those are the things that I would focus on and put those in.
On future development in the city? What are things that you would like to see being brought to the city? Would you like to look at develop more in housing or business?
I think a little bit of both, honestly. Commerce is a huge need within our city, and not necessarily just more big box stores or anything like that, but just commerce in general. There was an interesting question asked at the last debate about perhaps a college within our city limits in the North Shore area. And I really like that idea. I have liked that idea. That's something that we've talked about in past experiences I've had running for council. And so there are, with as much space as we have up there, that is a huge opportunity for us. North Shore opens a variety of doors, and we have to be aggressive with our economic development efforts. We have to be creative and crafty in what we do. We're a bit hamstrung on how much additional funding we have for economic development efforts. It's been mentioned in other debates, but I'll just rehash it that half of our sales tax for the city goes to DART, so we only have that 1 cent to work with, and that goes into our general budget. Other cities, with their 2 cents, they use 1 for their general budget, and the other cent goes to their economic development, typically a corporation, so they have outside people working. So we're a little bit limited in what we can do, and that hamstrings our efforts with being able to do more. But overall, I think a mix of both is what's needed for Rowlett.
I would agree that a mix of both would be great for the city of Rowlett. But for a vision, for myself, is I'd like to see more commercial development. And I'm excited for what's to come with the Sapphire Bay and the promises that it brings for retail and commercial. I'm also excited for the different residential pieces that they're going to put in there with the multifamily of housing that will be going in. I'm also the Sapphire, or the North Shore vision that was set out, as Jeff had said, with the medical and the educational facilities. I'm very much in favor of that. I think it would bring really a good well-roundedness to Rowlett, and bring in a different aspect to Rowlett that we don't have, that we need, that our citizens really need for our city to be great.
Also, I really like the educational piece because that was brought up in our previous debate, and I think that has great value. And if you could do something like that at the North Shore, I think that would add so much value. It would be great as people are coming down George Bush. You know, one of the first things you see is you see some kind of an educational facility. But I also believe it would help to assuage much of the frustration for the residents who live in Liberty Grove and the Homestead area. But I'm a big proponent of seeing a lot of commercial development. I'd like to see some of that as local development if we could. I believe the more commercial development we have coming into our city, the better it adds to our tax revenues. And I think when you see things like Sapphire Bay come on, I think it will be a magnet for other commercial entities to want to come into our city. And I think that would help because they would want to come here and we wouldn't have to entice them with a lot of tax giveaways, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, you're going to be first on this one. Okay, just following up with that, many citizens believe Rowlett is a city of liquor stores, nail salons, and fast food restaurants. I don't see anything wrong with a nail salon, but you know. Do you agree? If so, what, if anything, do you think should be done to change that?
I agree? Yes, when I go down Rowlett, I do notice that there are abundance of those items in those stores, and they seem to stay in business. So we must have a city that is in like of that. The one thing I can tell you is that we have 3 different tools in our city that will help us further economic development. And as a city council person, I'd like to engage further with that. And we have the economic development city workers, and Libby Tucker, she's doing a great job in helping us work with our brokers, site workers, and developers to bring in more economics, community, and e-commerce into our city. But then we also have the Economic Development Advisory Board that's helping our citizens, bringing in citizens' input into that. That works really closely with the third, which is the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce has been a great partnership with our city and also helps with programs to keep those small businesses up and going.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Many cities believe Rowlett is a city of liquor stores, nail salons, and fast food restaurants. Do you agree? And if so, what, if anything, do you think should be done to change that?
Well, I do agree there's a lot. I don't do a lot of eating at fast food. Don't visit the liquor stores. I definitely don't go to the nail stores. But yeah, I think so. I'd like, in terms of restaurants, I'd like to see us be able to attract some really good restaurants. And I'm thinking, I really love to see a good steakhouse here, among other things. But what can we do about it? I think we have to aggressively go after good commercial business who comes in, sets up a business of operations. Other people are going to see that's going to be kind of a magnet to it, and people are going to come where the market is. I've heard often people say, oh, we'd love to have an HEB here. Well, we would too, but they're not going to come here unless there's a good market for it. So I think, you know, if we create an environment where we're seeing improvements in our commercial business retail area, I believe that naturally would bring along some other things like good restaurants and so forth to support that.
So as someone who frequents Facebook, yes, I totally understand that sentiment. We definitely have kind of an image of being the liquor store, nail salon city. But I'm a firm believer in capitalism, and honestly, those businesses are there because people are frequenting them. They're spending their money there. And we have had 2 of our liquor stores that closed within the past year, so you know that's worth noting too. Sapphire Bay, I think, is going to change the game, particularly down on the south end of the peninsula. It's going to attract, obviously there'll be a lot more people there, number one, but it's going to attract some type of major store there, likely a grocery store. I don't see people driving all the way up Dow Rock to get to Dow Rock and 66 to go to either the neighborhood market or Tom Thumb, or even going to the other side of town to Aldi or somewhere else. So honestly, I think the best thing that we can do is to just aggressively market to these different businesses, as Mike said, and to continue to foster an environment where we are open to those types of development. Rowlett has a bit of a reputation for not being developer friendly, and we have to change that and pivot so that we have businesses that are excited to come here.
Okay. Mike, you're going to be first on this one. Kind of a follow-up to that question. I mean, Jeff has already mentioned Sapphire Bay, and you have a little bit. So when you look at Sapphire Bay, you were talking about a steakhouse. What are your thoughts about incentives? You'd also mentioned incentives, but are you open to incentives to bring new businesses to Rowlett, whether it be the HEB or a steakhouse or whatever? If that could be done, do you think that'll be helpful? One of the draws will obviously be Sapphire Bay, but what do you think as far as the city council you can do to draw in those other folks, those other businesses?
Well, to me, incentives are kind of a mixed bag. I'm not necessarily opposed to offering some sort of incentives to attract business, but I don't want it to be in such a way that we're really giving years and years and years, or giving away the farm, if you will, to a business that's essentially going to come in here and they're going to be setting up for profit. They're going to be making a profit. So I don't have a problem with some short targeted incentives to attract people, but I do believe, going back to my other statement earlier, once we see Sapphire Bay online, I believe that's going to be a magnet. And I don't believe it's just going to be for the south side. I think it's going to be a magnet that's going to filter up.
A little bit closer to your mouth. Can y'all
It's going to filter up all through Rowlett. And if we could see something on the North Shore, like an extension college, whether it's from A&M or wherever, just not OU, but but if we did that, then you have, I think, the best of both worlds, where you're not having to give away the farm, if you will, on 3 years, 5 years, or whatever reduced rates of tax that you're offering a business to come into.
Okay, Jeff?
Economic development incentives need to be strategic. We have to be much more strategic than we have been in the past. I would not be in favor of those types of incentives for residential developments. I think we have had our share of those, and in my opinion, they haven't worked out particularly well, particularly in our downtown space. However, when it comes to commercial incentives, there are things that we can do, and there are tactics that we can take that may not be as traditional as others. What we could do, if it's a major hub type development, is some type of a tax increment reinvestment zone, where part of the taxes from that particular parcel of property go back into supporting the infrastructure and building out that development. I think it's going to be crucial to a certain extent, but it has to be strategic. We can't just, again, give away the farm, as Mike put it.
I have to agree. I am in favor of tax incentives and bringing in the right businesses that will be attracting big commerce within Rowlett. And if they're strategic and can provide the right businesses that the Rowlett citizens desire to have here, and if we can bring in those businesses with the incentives that will create this catalyst to create more businesses to come in and more of a desire for commerce in Rowlett, that's what I would look to do.
Okay, Jeff, you're going to start on this one. And you'd mentioned, at your previous answer, you'd mentioned the housing and not thinking that some of those had been the best benefit of incentives. But apartments and multifamily being built in Rowlett are a sore subject for many residents. Apartment rents and residents' income is higher than most living in Rowlett. So what are your thoughts on additional apartments, considering the shortfall of multifamily in this region and across the country?
Over the past 3 years, really, Rowlett has not approved any additional apartments to be built. Prior to that is when there was just a major influx of approvals that happened. So unfortunately, we're going to continue to see apartments built that have been previously approved. The biggest example that I can think of is the Global Site development, which is at 190 and Main Street. It's under construction right now. Part of it's in Hereford Park. Aside from that, generally speaking, I would not be in favor of more apartments within our city. That being said, I think there is a need for multifamily senior housing And I think we have to look at that closely in terms of what's needed and what's marketable. But just general multifamily housing, I'm not a fan of.
Rowlett currently has approximately 3,000 multi-use or family facilities, apartment complexes within the city. And we're looking to bring on additional. The vision in North Shore is to have 1,300 more additional built. And in Sapphire Bay, approximately 1,500 more facilities built. That is a lot of facilities for Rowlett and additional housing. And that's without some of the other ones that Jeff had mentioned. I feel like we are really going to need to put some scrutiny and make sure that if there is a need for additional housing, that we don't take it lightly, and that we look and make sure that it meets the code criteria, and that before it comes into Rowlett.
Well, apartments is like the third rail of politics in Rowlett, like Social Security is at the federal level, and it is a complex issue. I'm neither anti-apartment or pro-apartment, but I'm trying to be as realistic as possible. I know we've got a lot of units that's already in our city, more that's already been approved and planned for. We just got to make sure that we do it. If we approve any more, it's got to be in the right areas of the city. We need to realize that the city's still growing population-wise, about 2.5% a year, maybe a little bit higher, and so people coming into the city has to live somewhere. And with the high prices of housing, a lot of them have no other choice but to live in an apartment. And then some of the younger people, the millennials, have this mindset of they would prefer to live urban style living, and they have no desire to live in a single family home. So it's a complex issue. What I'd say is, if I'm on the council, I will listen to every proposal before I make up my mind. I will give it all the scrutiny that's necessary, and obviously we want to look at to make sure that we have wide support from the citizens before we would ever do something like that. So.
Hey, Rebecca, you're first on this one. What do you think are the three of the most important issues facing the city in the next 3 years?
Three of the most important issues that I feel that the city has is we have an issue with our police department and with our judicial system. So we need to make sure that those things are resolved and cared for, that we have a city that has good support for our public safety, and that we're going through. I think the other my second thing that would be a need for the city is we need to make sure that we're set for our infrastructure in the future, and what the future of our infrastructure build outs will be to make sure we can support the city. And then of course our public safety and fire, and making sure that those things are in place. When Sapphire Bay is built, I feel like we're really going to need to hone in on the public safety out there, and that we have things in place so that fire and police will be able to support those residents and the Rowlett citizens that are going out there to visit the commerce out there.
I will classify it like this, and it's in priority. Essential services, number one, and we've talked about this to some extent with the chiefs and the municipal court judge. I think that is a top priority that we've got to resolve, one way or the other. Because if we keep bringing in new chiefs and we don't fix the problems, all we're doing is putting a Band-Aid on a problem. So that's got to be fixed. Number two is what I would consider the essential framework of our city. And I know Jeff talked about that a while ago, about this perception of being a city that's not business friendly. I think we need to review all the processes and procedures that our various organizations go through in approving development, whether it's a local business or whatever. And I think we need to, I'm not saying streamline, but it needs to be as flexible as possible so that we can truly be a city that's open for business. And then the last thing, and it's only three because of the complexity of it, we have to address our infrastructure. We barely have the money to maintain it, not to mention the improvements we need to see as a result of growth in our city.
So they've said pretty much everything I would have said as it relates to resolving the issue that's going on with our police department and our courts. There's not much more to say there, except that a key part of that will be finding the right police chief for our city. And the search process is going to have to be well managed so that we find the right guy for the job, or girl, sorry. Right man or woman for the job, should be politically correct. Second to that is managing our growth as a city. And that's not to say that we limit our growth or that we accelerate our growth. It's just managing it overall and not letting it overwhelm us. And that ranges everything from ensuring we have adequate public safety, adequate infrastructure, and that we can manage what's coming in with our planning department. Just ensure overall we need to manage the growth of our city really well. Third, I would say, is Sapphire Bay and ensuring that vision is realized. And I'm the first to admit, yes, that's a private development, but we, as a partnership with those developers, the city needs to ensure that we are recognizing the vision that was set out originally, and that we do not sacrifice or we do not cut corners or anything like that as it relates to Sapphire Bay.
Thanks, Jeff. Mike is going to start on this one. City of Rowlett seems divided on many issues. What will you do as a council member to help bring everyone together?
Would you say that again?
Yep, the city of Rowlett seems divided on many issues.
Okay.
So as a council member, what will you do to help bring people together?
Well, some of them are probably tired of hearing me say this, but I'll say it again because it's I said it in I think the two previous forums. Number one, we are divided, and one of the ways that we have to get away from that division is we have to look at people as who they are, not what they are. And I related this story earlier. In the Marine Corps, my first week in boot camp, we had a drill instructor that would line us up and say, there's no blacks, there's no whites, there's no Hispanics, there's no Asians, you're all green. And what he was really saying, and it stuck with me all these years later, is that it's more important on who you are. Now, his job is he wanted to make us Marines, and to do that, we couldn't concentrate on anything else we were. We needed to concentrate on who we are or who we're going to become. And I believe that is the key in getting people to come together. We talk to people, we talk with people based on who they are and not what they are.
Jeff? You did.
So I'm not going to sit here and promise that I'm going to be able to fix what amounts to probably 10 plus years of political strife within our nation or anything like that. But a big part of being a council member is listening. We are responsible to listen to what the residents have to say. We are here to represent you, and we are here to serve you. And it is only fair that we take the time to listen to the concerns that are shared with us. Communication for me, I think I said it earlier, communication for me is a big part of that. And being able to communicate requires discourse, right? Discourse. But there's this thing called civil discourse, and I'm all about keeping the civil in civil discourse. If we disagree, we just need to do it respectfully. That's all there is to it. When we get into name calling and we get into hateful comments, we're not going to end up anywhere good. We're going to get further apart. And if we start out by focusing on the things that bring us together as opposed to the things that break us apart, we're already setting off on the right path to be better at listening and better at understanding one another. I also beat the buzzer.
Y'all are amazing. This is
Teamwork and camaraderie means so much to me, and so does integrity and trust. And those are the foundations that you can build relationships on. So I think it's all about building relationships, opening your ear to others so that you are actually hearing them, what they're saying, and trying to understand where they're coming from. And then you can take that in as facts and to make some decisions together. When you come to the table and you're wanting to make a good decision, both parties should walk away with a win. That's when you know that you've made the right decision. This is not easy, but it takes a lot of listening, learning, and even compromise on things that you may not have agreed with before, but seeing the other party's point of view.
Okay, Jeff, let's look at, if you're elected, what are the principles that will guide you in making decisions as a council member?
ultimately, doing my best to represent the people of Rowlett, and that's not any one group or any one person. It's Rowlett as a whole. We have to recognize we're a very diverse city. We come from a lot of backgrounds. We have a very diverse economic makeup, and so it will be especially important for us to make decisions on the whole and not on any one part.
Ask for you to repeat.
Yes. If you're elected, what are the principles that will guide you in making decisions as a council member?
So my principles that I stand on is I would integrity and trust. And as the servant leader, I would put service before self, to make sure that I use an unbiased opinion to represent all Rowlett.
I will use a word that maybe is not used much anymore, and that is, I think the number one thing that I would want to do is practice good stewardship. And stewardship is about making sure you use the resources that are given to you from the citizens of our community and applying those things in the best way that brings the best benefit. You know, we can easily look at, Washington and say they get up there and they spend money like they're a drunken sailor. Okay, I'm sorry, sailors, but that's a good analogy. And we can't do that. We have to practice good stewardship with the resources, the limited resources that we have.
If we could,
Start you on this one.
can we take just a little pause?
Yeah.
They're not, Nathan, if you can put this mic on, they're not hearing you.
Oh,
And
I'm
so
hearing a lot up here. Y'all aren't hearing me?
online.
Oh, sorry.
Online. So
Okay.
we'll use that one. And if y'all will speak directly, and that's one of the
Do we
issues
need to turn this one off?
that they'll turn off. Yeah. Just stop right.
Sorry, y'all. Oh, are we on? Can you hear me? Can you hear on this one, guys? He's saying they're not hearing me online. Okay. Can y'all hear me in the house? And y'all can hear me online? Okay, great. Sorry about that, guys at home. Okay, I lost my place. Okay, let's look at council one more time as far as the process. Do you think council and mayor compensation should be raised? Do you think that council term limits should be extended past the current 2 3-year terms?
As far as council and, what was the first part?
Okay, the first question is, do you think that compensation should be
Compensation.
raised for the mayor and the council? And do you think that the current council term limits, which are 2 3-year terms, is that sufficient? Does that need to be changed, or are you comfortable where it is?
So, as far as compensation goes, I don't necessarily believe that should be raised. I really believe that this is a servant's position, and the minimal amount that is granted should just take care of amenities that are provided. As far as whether or not the term limits should be changed, I believe that we do not need to extend the term limits any more than they are. I think that it's good to get new people in with different ideas, and that can actually complete the cycle. Once you've completed your cycle and run for your second term or what have you, then you need to make sure that new blood gets in there so that we have new ideas coming in to keep the creativity within Rowlett.
Make sure you hold that up. Hold it up to your mouth.
Yeah, certainly not running for the money. And no, I do not believe it needs to be raised. Now, someone told me that the stipend for the council was to accommodate for your gas. Obviously, it's probably not doing that anymore. But no, I don't think composition needs to be raised, and I do not believe that we ought to change the term limits. I'm a big proponent of our form of government, and I think our forefathers always intended that it would be for a time for citizens to come from wherever they're doing to represent their community and then to go back to wherever they came from. And I'm a firm believer in that.
Jeff?
So in 2020, I served on the Charter Review Commission and was tasked with reviewing both of these items, actually, as part of what we did. And the commission as a whole made 2 recommendations for both of these items. We recommended an increase to council compensation as well as a change to the term limits. Personally, knowing what I know now about how the residents responded to both of those, I do not think we need to make a change to council compensation. I do agree that it is a position of servant leadership. We are here to, again, serve the residents, represent the residents, and I don't believe that monetary compensation is what we should be striving for as the result of that. The term limits is a little bit different discussion because the way that our charter is written currently would allow someone to serve two 3-year terms on council, take a year off, and potentially come back and run again if they so chose. So there is not a cap on the number of years of service that someone could serve as a council member. That's not to say they would continue to be elected, of course, but currently there are no, quote, term limits. I would like to see that rewritten such that there is a cap on the total number of years of service, whether that's as a council member or as mayor or as some combination thereof. I don't believe that City of Rowlett politics is designed to be a lifelong endeavor. I think you come in and serve your community while you're here, and then you graciously step aside.
Okay, Mike, you'll be first on this one. Talking about serving on the council and it being a servant-type issue, I know y'all all have busy lives. With lots of things going on and a job with many responsibilities, and putting your family first is always the best thing. But will it leave you time to vote to the many, many hours of preparations for meetings, all of the special called and regular meetings and workshops, and the local and regional civic events and board meetings and training sessions that council members are expected to attend?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is I stopped working for a paycheck about a year ago, so I do have the time. I want to make sure that I take care of my family when my family needs arise. I mean, my wife and I have been married almost 50 years this June, and there's a reason we've been married 50 years. I try to take care of my wife, so that's my number one goal. But no, I'm not going in this thing with blindfolders on. I understand the amount of hours it takes, and yeah, someone said, well, there's just 2 bi-monthly meetings. No, there's lots more stuff that's going on than that. There's all the events that you're expected to show up. There's all the special council meetings. Throughout the summer, we'll be packed with budget review meetings and so forth. No, I completely understand, and I would not have gotten into this race if I could not make that commitment.
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely. I mean, that's why we're doing what we're doing. It's definitely a labor of love, and being a council member is what you make of it. Yeah, I guess the bare minimum is the 2 meetings a month that we're required to commit to, but I plan to be at every event that I can possibly be at. I have been super strongly involved with a lot of things within the city over the past several years, not just the past, the past couple years have definitely made things interesting as far as being involved, but prior to that, I've been at many of the civic events. I've been at a number of council meetings, spoken at a number of council meetings. Often you might see me with a camera in my hand because I'm typically documenting these things. That's just what I do. But yeah, the short answer is absolutely 100% committed.
I'm 100% committed as well. So much so that I've even made time management is the key to this. And that would mean giving up my vacation time at work to make sure that I'm at the absolute critical things that will take the whole day from a council member's perspective, going to the budget meetings and going to the planning, strategic planning events, and making sure that you schedule the time to make sure that you can make all that. As an empty nester, my nights and weekends are a little bit more free than they used to be. So this is being taken up much by council time, studying, research, attending events, which I enjoy. I love the service to the city of Rowlett. I've really enjoyed my life here and continue to do so. And to serve the citizens is what really is joyous for me.
Okay, great. We're trying to keep this at an hour. I'm going to do 2 more questions. Did everybody get to answer that question?
Yes.
Yeah, Jeff, you're first. You're right. Okay, so, what does transparency in government mean to you? And do you think it's important in a representative democracy?
Transparency is paramount. It is our responsibility as council members, as elected council members, to earn the trust of those that we serve. And we have to be willing to be available and to listen and to share those things that we can. Within certain boundaries. There are executive sessions and there are privileged meetings by necessity that the city must have, whether it's for legal consultation or if it's a personnel matter or if we're in some type of economic development negotiation. All of those things are really important to protecting some level of privacy. And I will give one example. If we had a developer, for example, that was wanting to locate a business here and they were prepared to buy a piece of property at a certain price, if that information were to be made public, obviously whoever's selling that piece of property could change the game, so to speak, right? They know what the asking price is. They know what they can get for that piece of property. And that would ultimately damage that relationship. And so there are certain things that happen behind closed doors that are by necessity, but I think we really have to be careful how often we use that and what they're used for so that we are as open and transparent as absolutely possible.
I think a transparent government is very important to our residents. For them having as much information as possible to know what's happening in their city, to be able to have a voice to that is important. As I agree with Jeff, there are some things that probably do need to take the strategic a part of it and how things will be strategy and taking forward behind closed doors. Just like in business, if you're making a deal, you don't want to put all your cards on the table because you might throw out one of your other constituents that are coming in as well. And you don't want everybody knowing all the information so that they would underhand something. But transparency for our residents and the things that we know are going to impact them needs to be important to our city. I know that our city has done a great job in being a transparent government and providing all of the details on the city website, which has been wonderful. They've even posted everything from past years. You can go out and go to the microfiche and see the links to that to get to the details. So they're very open about it.
And I think this has been addressed pretty much to a lot of detail already with Rebecca and Jeff. But I'll just say the city needs to realize that the city has a first and foremost responsibility to respond to the citizens, because it is the citizens' government. It is our government. And unless you have transparency, then you're going to have further division in your community. You're going to have mistrust. You're going to have things that we just don't want in Rowlett. So being transparent to the extent that you can in those occasions when you do have an executive session, which I do agree with Jeff, they need to be rare, then yes, you have an obligation to make sure that the confidentiality of that executive session remains confidential. But again, those should be far and few between, and everything else should be as transparent to the citizens, the owners of our government, as possible.
Okay, great. This could be our final question. Rebecca, you're going to start. And we're going to kind of tie. I've got a question that says, tell us 3 reasons voters should vote for you instead of your opponent. So you can tie that into it, but I want to hear what your 2 minutes, if this is your last 2 minutes before talking, that you get a chance to talk to voters before early voting starts Monday, right? What do you want them to know about you? And why you are the best choice. So we don't necessarily need 3 reasons, but just why you're the best choice in this particular race. Jeff, I know you're already coming in, but you can still answer that.
I feel like I am the best choice for Rowlett citizens because I serve as an unbiased opinion. I have great quality and data and analytics to bring forth facts that will help with our fellow city councils. I know that I will be 1 of 7, so that means that there needs to be great teamwork amongst the council in order to make a decision. Also, I feel that I really want to serve. I want to serve the residents. I want to be here for everyone in the city. So with that, please vote for me.
Okay, Mike.
Wow.
Put that mic close.
So, yeah, I am a servant at heart. I'm in fact the servanthood is in my DNA. I served for 20 years in the Marine Corps. I serve in my local church. I want to serve this community in the best way I can. I don't couch it in terms of I'm the best choice. I think I'm a great choice. And that's saying that I'm no better than anybody else, but I am a great choice for Rowlett. I have life experiences. I have a lot of experience in being able to deal with people from a diverse background. I have great experience in being able to collaborate across lines, working with the other council members and the mayor to get things done. So I do think I am the best choice, and I really want you to consider me for your vote, not just so I can sit on council, but so I can be your voice.
Jeff?
So my history within the city, I think, qualifies me as a great candidate. I have, again, only been here since 2014, but in that time, I have made a deep dive into everything Rowlett during that time. Immediately upon moving to Rowlett, I thought it was important to volunteer in 3 different areas. The first was within the city. So I joined the Arts and Humanities Commission in 2015, and I've been there ever since, served as chair for 3 years as well. I decided to volunteer at my kid's school, so I wanted to get involved with PTA, be a part of that process, and have been PTA president, treasurer, a couple different positions throughout the years, as well as coordinating events. And the third was to get involved for my church, and so I've been on the leadership board with my church a couple different times, and am heavily involved in things that go on there as well. But I have a real commitment to this city, and I feel like I bring a very even, calm voice to what might otherwise be a little bit of craziness, particularly as it relates to just discussion that happens out within the community. And again, I think it's super important that we as representatives listen to the people of Rowlett and serve as a voice to share that opinion with the rest of council and to just be there for the community. My motto is focused on community, and I stand by that 100%.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, y'all, I think y'all have some great candidates to choose from. Early voting starts Monday. Get out and vote. I'm sure these guys will hang around if you want to ask a question directly. And let's give them a hand for coming up here and being grilled. It's hard to do. And I'm going to turn it back over to the pastor.
Again, we thank you all for coming. If you would stand with us, and y'all stand, we've been sitting for quite a while. Again, thank y'all for coming. We'll be having the mayoral forum tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. I just want to again reiterate, Freedom Place Church, we do not endorse a specific candidate. We're just providing this event and this information as education to all the citizens of Rowlett. It is on Facebook. It is on our website as far as the video. And again, I just want to thank each one of you for serving. And so for note as well, all the other candidates did notify us that they had other conflicting events, and actually Deb was sick, and she missed the Democratic one. They all wanted me to express that to everyone, and they actually, some of them they want to respond with their own video to the questions, and if they can watch it online, they're very viable to do that. We'd love them to do that, but we're not sending them the questions or anything, but they can watch the video and post their own responses to that, because these 3 took it without any prep. And can we give them another big hand for that as well? Very much. I'd like to close in prayer, and again, thank y'all for attending. Father God, we just thank you for such a wonderful city we live in. Lord, the Bible says in Jeremiah 29:7, seek the peace and prosperity of the city which I've called you into. Ask the Lord for it, for when it prospers, you too will prosper. That's why we do what we do here at Freedom Place. We just want our city to prosper and to be blessed. So bless these candidates, the others that weren't able to make it, the mayoral candidates. Most of all, bless our city. And we ask you again, Lord, to put it on the hearts of people to come out and vote beginning Monday. Let this be, I pray, the greatest turnout in voters that we've ever had here in Rowlett, just as a sign that the citizens are engaging and re-engaging in our community civic duty. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And thank you, Miss Cindy, as well. Give her a big hand. Great job, sir.
It's a pleasure.
Great answers.
You can ask them probably.